Thank you, everyone. What we're going to have now is we've got some preset questions which came from various members, and sometimes we have put a few questions together because they were similar. And what I'd like to do is ask you all the same questions and see what your point of view is about them. And you've quite a lot of you have mentioned housing, so I'm going to actually start with a housing question. Um, So you are absolutely right in the sense that housing is a huge problem for everybody. There's probably nobody who doesn't have a lot of money who's finding the housing situation very easy just now. But it's a particular problem for certain disabled people. For people with mobility or other physical impairments, they can wait a very long time for accessible housing, which curtails their ability to socialise, work, or meet their everyday needs. And for people with learning difficulties, there's another issue where people used to be able to get supported housing, and that is very hard to get now. And so a lot of people are living when they don't want to with families who just feel they can't. What can they do? What can the families do? The families don't really. It's not ideal for the person to be there, and the person actually really doesn't want to spend their whole life living with their family in many cases. But there's so few choices, and it's a really important part of independence. So these are the two key groups for housing issues. Sorry, sorry. These are the two key groups I'd like you to address around housing. People with learning difficulties who need supported living to leave home, and people with physical or other kind of impairments, which mean they need a very accessible, a high level of accessibility. And these homes are rarer than hen's teeth in Harrow. So I'm going to pass it back to Pamela, and you can, if you can work along the line again and tell me what you think. Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm putting this past you now, Alex. It's going to Pamela.
Thank you. Yes, it is a big problem. And what you'll get from the council, and this has been true of both Labour and Conservative, they say, well, we just don't have any housing. So sorry, make do, basically. Um, I work in a centre that gives legal advice, and we take the council to court quite often because they don't provide suitable housing. But you shouldn't need to have to do that. At election time, all the politicians will tell you, we care about this, but where are they the rest of the 4 years? What have they done? So if you look at the block that's been built near to where the old Civic Centre was, that should have some of the accommodation should be accessible. None of it is, because what happens is the developers come back over and over again and just say, well, it's not viable. And the council, whether Labour or Conservative, allow them to do that. So you have rights, but how do you enforce those rights? And that's the problem. Until you make radical change and stop seeing housing as a way to get rich, then nothing is going to change. It's just tinkering around at the edges. So we need a programme of housing that is council housing, that is social housing, not affordable housing, which actually that is a misuse of the English language because it's not affordable. And then you'll be building homes for people that they need, not for greed. It's as simple as that. But we have no political parties who are willing to do that. And we need to stop allowing them to get away with this. We need to stop them building these tower blocks and telling us we have to do that to address the housing crisis. Well, it's not. And I see all the time, I've seen people who've had to carry an adult up and down stairs to bed and to the toilet because they are not in suitable accommodation. I've seen people live in that sort of situation for decades, and neither council, well, whatever political colour it is, has done anything about it. So that's what we need to do. The same is true of supported housing because it costs money. They don't want to spend the money. But it's in the end, people will talk. We'll get on to benefits later, I'm sure. We keep hearing people on benefits are a problem. It's costing us too much. It's not the people on benefits that are costing too much. It's the landlords who are ripping everybody off by charging extortionate rents for unsuitable accommodation. So disabled people or people with learning disabilities are having to live in unsuitable accommodation, often feeling frightened because they don't have the support that they have. And all the while, the landlords are getting richer and richer, and we're paying for that. And yet, we never hear the landlords attacked, do we? It's always the individuals who are on benefits. So we have to tackle the root cause, or nothing is going to change. So that's all I'll say for now. Come back to benefits later.
So I think the issue is that, once again, disabled people aren't being put first. We're always talking about unaffordability, but it's not just unaffordability. Disabled people aren't being thought of when we're talking about housing. So we don't just need to retrofit and make houses more accessible, but we need developers to actually think of accessibility first. As mentioned, there aren't enough send housing, which we need a lot more of. I think developers, we need to crack down on them, because we need to ensure that they have those requirements to make sure that their houses are accessible. And I think we also need quotas so that enough houses are actually made accessible, because right now there aren't enough in Harrow. I'm also living in a damp and mouldy home with a poor housing association, and nothing's being done to crack down on housing associations who aren't looking after their residents. So I think there's a lot more to do in terms of disabled people in houses.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for your questions, and you're quite right. In terms, firstly, of council housing, is that better? Okay, thank you. In terms of council housing here in Harrow, we have a very low number, and one of the things that we will look to do is start at least 500 new council housing, not private developer, council housing over the next period of the council. And importantly, we will look to make sure that proper accessibility is available to a required proportion of these. Some of the houses we did build when we were last in power were accessible council flats, but we weren't able to build enough. The second thing we want to do is to bring private landlords back into account. We don't want the situation of private landlords, for example, not repairing the lifts in their tower blocks for weeks and weeks and months, and through best efforts of the council and local councillors and the law centre, very difficult to get these people to actually take any action in a meaningful time frame. So we need to take firmer action against what I'd call rogue landlords, to make sure, not just for disabled people, but for anyone living in their properties, that they get proper value for money and proper accessibility. The third thing I would say is, when we're talking about people wanting to live in their own homes or in family homes, is I want to increase the speed with which the council and its partners does assessments in terms of making homes accessible, in terms of providing equipment and adaptations, so that people can live their own lives with their families and not be barred for doing so by the fact that the physical structure isn't available to them. So I need to make our assessment process in the council much faster than it is at the moment. There are backlogs at the moment, and we want to fight to make sure that those are brought down so people can get results very, very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, there we go. Saw my cable out. Yes, thank you. I think housing's one of the most important issues for Harrow, and it's why we've put it front and centre in our manifesto and pledges, and I'm pleased to see others picking up on some of the issues that we are as well. When we're talking about housing, we're not just talking about roofs over people's head and shelter. We're talking about places where people can call home, where they can go somewhere and feel comfortable and safe. And that includes providing people with all of the facilities they need to live comfortably, autonomously, and in dignity. And I think pledges to do accessibility in some areas and quotas around that, it's not necessarily the right approach. I think every building in Harrow needs to have accessible entrances, exits, way to move around those properties. And to do that, we need to get people from different communities into the design process and have that consultation-based approach where we are saying which part of the community is this building specific to? How can we get them involved in the design process so it actually meets their needs? And that's physical accessibility. But when it comes to people with learning difficulties and potentially mental health challenges as well, it's how do we put those support infrastructure in place in those buildings or in those locations where people can actually get the support they need. So is it the question that we need to build pharmacies or doctor surgeries or just have areas where support staff can live nearby to support people who have those disabilities? The key thing for me is, we are judged as a society about how we treat everyone in our community, and that includes people who are living with disabilities. And what does it say about us as Harrovians, as people who live in Harrow, when we hear from people with disabilities who are not able to get the support service they vitally need to live a good life and live a comfortable life in their own home? And that's why we are looking at housing incredibly seriously. And the comment around speed of getting needs assessment done is something that we've identified as well. The council is far too slow at doing these needs assessments, and we need to pick up the pace and make sure that people can have those needs assessments done and the right modifications done in their homes to make sure that they can live a comfortable life. It is borderline disgusting how poor housing is in Harrow, and that's through years of mismanagement. And we need to change this, and this is why housing is incredibly important to us, for disabled people and for everybody in Harrow who needs a place to live, a place to work, and a place to call home. Thank you.
Thank you.